We're preparing.
There it is. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Code Noobs. Russell here, along with my good friends, Randy and Danny. How you guys doing? Happy January 6th. It's 9 a.m.
Yeah, Happy New
Right.
Year.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's
Happy New Year.
2024. I thought I'd never say that. Seems like feels so old. I don't know. Like, did you ever think you were going to make it to the 2024s? It's almost
Thought the
2025.
world was gonna collapse when
I
everything
know,
turned the
They
honestly.
said
dot-com bubble
2012 was
or
the end,
dot-com,
but
whatever. Yeah.
they lied.
Well,
2000
I know.
when
2000,
the
First it was
computers take
2000 is
over.
2000,
real scary. Yeah.
then it was 2012. Now
The
it's
Y2K. Remember the parties, the Y2K parties? That was funny.
I do.
Everybody
Mm.
thought things was gonna collapse. Satellites were gonna fall out of the sky.
I have a very distinct memory of like banging a spoon against a pan on 2000 whatever, January 1st, 2000. It's like my only
Yeah.
memory of that. Anyway, hope you guys are all doing good. Had a good week. Been coding away, and I've been coding away for sure. We have some pretty cool announcements at the end of today's live stream, so stick around for that. And Randall, I don't see you doing your like
Before
announcement.
we get into it today, what have you guys been up to today? Are you working on projects? Are you learning new languages? What are you doing to start this new year off right?
Yeah, let us know. What are you doing? I am learning Next.js. That's what I'm doing. And just coding a ton. Like I don't think I've coded more ever. And I feel like it's just
Mm.
gonna be that way for a while. But that's good.
That's coding,
So
right?
yeah,
The
that's
more
how
you
it
do it, the
goes.
more there is to code.
It's so cool though. Like I love like breaking through that barrier like of uh like when you're coding and you're like, this is just so frustrating. I don't understand any of it. And then you sit there for a while and you just grind through it. And then eventually you're like, get to this point where like, why did I think that was so hard before? This is like super easy.
Dude, that is the best feeling too. And like when you solve a problem that you had and then you just start coding faster and faster because like things are going together, right? Like you,
Yeah.
you got over that hurdle. Oh, it feels really good. Yeah.
Awesome. I had some of that this week. So
Great
anyway,
feeling.
so today's topic is how to stay accountable when you're learning to code. And I thought this would be a good one because um, I personally went through like a couple phases of learning to code where I like started and I quit, and I started and I quit, or I did like some things, but then I didn't learn all of it. And I've had a lot of questions about this. And like, I think generally speaking, if you're going down the route of like self taught or maybe even a boot camp, it can sometimes be confusing what you need to do, like what your path is, and then how to keep yourself on that path and not get distracted by shiny object syndrome or get demotivated, or there's just so many different things that can happen. And so I thought maybe it would be good to talk a little bit about how somebody who's in this group who's learning to code can keep themselves accountable, and really just like achieve their goals. So with that, I'll just leave it to you two. I'll just sit here
We'll
and
solve this
yeah.
problem. You just say something and then
Yeah.
we'll answer it. Yeah.
I mean,
No,
clearly
but
the answer is the same thing as when you want to be held accountable going to the gym. You just post it on Facebook, and then
Yeah.
everybody
I
you're like,
I
I'm
mean,
starting the new year off going to the gym for 3 hours every single day. I'm going to lose 100 pounds. Now everybody knows, so and you do
I
it for
know
three
you're
days. That's
joking, but
clearly
that
the
actually
answer.
is like a really good strategy. Like you
It
do
is
know
a
that.
strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So like
I'm not confident that it actually works for
It
anyone.
doesn't.
Because
you don't think so?
my
I'm
no,
sure
I
some
because
people
I
it
think
does,
that
but
people get the validation they're looking for the moment they post that on Facebook.
Ah,
That
that's pretty
and then they're
good.
like, "Hey, I already did it." Everybody's like, "Congratulations, great job. That's so good for you." They get all the validation they want, and
Yeah.
then they really don't keep up with it. Whereas I think like actually kind of keeping that type of secret to yourself and working on it,
Mm,
and then afterwards, after you've done it, like be like, "Hey, I signed this letter to myself, 3 months ago that I was going to lose this much weight, and I did it." Then you get double the validation because you did it
mm.
yourself, and you get everybody on Facebook saying, "Yay, good job."
Yeah, that's true. So one of the things that I was thinking about discussing was SMART goals. Do you know what SMART goals
Oh
are?
my gosh. Please don't.
I don't know. I
Why
don't know what
not? Why
this is.
not? Why not?
I
Let's
don't know
hear it.
what this term is.
SMART goals.
Specific, measurable, actionable, results oriented, and timely. Is
Yeah.
that it?
You not know that
Okay.
one?
What do you know?
Well,
Every
let's
acronym?
discuss
Here's-
it. Let's discuss
Here's
it.
why I
No.
wanted. Here's why I wanted to discuss.
I'm bad
it,
at
right?
acronyms, by
I
the
know
way.
you
but
guys are
yeah.
just hating today. I don't know what all
No,
this.
we're not.
I know, right?
You're like,
No, you're right.
screw,
These
Just
screw
in a
your
bad
topic.
mood.
Screw your topic. I'm just gonna tear you down. No. So here's why I said that. So I agree with you that, you know, you get that dopamine release in your head as soon as you do that post, right? And I think the reason why is that social media just sucks in general because all of social media is fake, right? Like it's a curated look into somebody's
Everything.
fake life, right? And so we naturally give these like curated fake replies and, you know, exaggerations and hype around anything that somebody posts on social media. So I agree with you. I don't think that that's a great place to do that. Where I think it is a great place is with people who are like local to you and can keep you accountable and are willing to do that, right? So if you have like a family member or a friend or a coding buddy who who you can like make a smart goal to, right? Because the other thing too is like to just say I'm going to code, that's not really much, right? Like I'm going to learn to code, that doesn't mean anything. So that's why I think smart goals are valuable because they have, you know, they're measurable. That's
Well,
the
no, that makes sense though. Yeah, you need in order to know that you're doing something and hold yourself accountable, clear metrics are really important. Like
yeah.
knowing what does success look like? Is it coding 5 minutes a day? Is it, is it getting to this place, in my
Morning,
learning
Chris.
process, whatever. What's up, Chris? How's it going? But I did
Sorry.
want to say though, what you mentioned was like reminding me too of if you know what Jane McGonigal talks about gamifying life as
Mm-hmm.
a way to help us motivate ourselves. And like one of the things she says, which works kind of well with what you were talking about, is like find people that would be willing to work with you and make it into a game. Like, this gets me this many points. So working an
Mm.
hour a day on coding gives me like 10 points or something, whatever, and set goals for yourself that way to kind of like turn it into a game, the learning process to keep you motivated.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my big thing with the SMART goals is the time factor. Because
Time.
Time's hard.
so
Yeah.
like I've been to a whole bunch of these like motivational type
Wait,
seminars
before you
where
get
they're
into this, can you explain to everyone what a smart goal is? Like I know
a
you
smart
did already, but like the
Okay, so
actual
it's a
pieces.
specific goal. You know exactly what you're doing. It's measurable, so you know when you've done it. It's actionable. You have steps to accomplish it. It's results oriented, so it's not focused on the problem, it's focused on what you're going to get. And then it's timely
Time.
or time oriented. And so the big thing for me is the timeliness of it. Because the
Okay.
time factor, 120% out of your control. There was actually something that I was listening to that no matter what time you set for something, it's going to take longer. Like for almost
Mm.
all the projects, there's some law that they named after that, where no matter how much time you set for something, it ends up taking longer.
Mhm.
And I think that can be a barrier for a lot of people because
Yeah.
it's super easy to give up.
Yeah.
In order to be a coder, you need to be resilient. You need to keep going. You need to be persistent. You need to just like not give up, basically. And that's the
Yeah.
only way that anyone has ever become a coder is just by not giving up. You've wanted to quit a million times. You've put the book down to quit a million times, but you pick it back up. Like that's the difference between people who code and people who don't. And I think
Yeah.
that time factor is something that'll mess people up because they'll be like, I'm going to learn HTML in 24-hour book in 24 hours. And
Yeah.
they'll sit down and they'll do 8 hours and they'll be exhausted and go to sleep and wake up the next day and be like, I knew I couldn't do it. I'm not a coder. Clearly, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And it's
I
just
mean, that happened to
like,
me multiple times.
Yeah. Those
yeah,
expectations are dangerous, though, I think. And that's why I hate those books that are like learn Python in 24 hours and all this stuff, because it's like, you can't. You're going to learn basically nothing in 24 hours.
So
You're way better off on a long scale time, like over a year or, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you
but
do instead then?
well,
Oh,
you would just have SMAR goals or SRAM goals, which is basically everything without the T.
without the T.
Yeah.
I'm
But, like,
feeling really smart today, guys.
yeah.
Smart.
It's the French version of SMART goals. You don't pronounce the last syllable.
Smart.
SMART
Smart.
goals. Yeah. Because
But it's
here's the thing. You can control what you're going to do, or you can control the time that it's going to take you to do it. You can't do both. So you can either say, I'm going to learn all this stuff, and then however long it takes is however long it takes, or you're going to say, I'm going to do something for this long, and then however much you learn in that amount of time, that's how much you can learn. But both of them you don't have control over.
No, I think you're right though. I think having measurable goals is great because it can help you look back on your life and say, okay, I've come this far. But I don't like the time thing either. I never paid attention to it because it is what makes you quit. I do agree with you on that.
We
Like,
should have just named today's episode "Why Smart Goals Are Dumb."
Why Randall has a personal vendetta
I
against
know, right?
right?
goals.
but
Oh
I would
man.
also offer what worked for me or has worked for me too, that's been helpful to stay accountable and motivated is actually to remind myself over and over again whenever I'm stuck why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Like that, having a why I think is super helpful for keeping yourself accountable. Like,
Yeah.
for me, that was like I didn't like my job that I was doing, and that was a good motivation to learn something else and do something. And every time I got stuck, I'd be like, well, it's this, what I'm doing now, or something that I want to learn that's positive, or going
Yeah.
back to what I hate. And it's like, so, that's a really good motivation and accountability factor, I think, having something to like look to remind yourself why you're doing it.
Yeah. So I have a few questions, Randall, about this
About time.
these smart goals that you have. So suppose that I do choose to go down your smart goal route. How do I
Yeah.
know that I'm like actually staying accountable? Like if there's no deadline, I could just be like, well, yeah, I mean, I was
Oh,
supposed to learn
because it's
Python.
actionable. So
Okay.
you have a specific actions that you need to accomplish to get there. So like
Okay.
if you're learning HTML, your actions are complete this chapter, this chapter, this chapter, this chapter. You just check them off, and you look back over the past week, over the past month. Am I making progress, or am I at a standstill?
Gotcha. So how would you compare your progress to like maybe previous progress? Is that sort of what you're saying too? Because like to me, it's like I know you can't control both. I get that. Like I totally agree with you. And definitely as a software developer, it can be like dangerous to put those sort of goals, like those timelines on goals, because I agree, when you don't hit them, you feel very demotivated. But I also think that, I spent years being like, I'm learning whatever, and I never really like learned it because I thought I was going down a path and I wasn't, right? I wasn't actually like I wasn't getting towards the goal. I was just sort of like floating around near the goal,
Well, you're
like,
doing what a lot of people do, right? Where you're procrastinating by like learning little things that are easy to feel good without actually ever advancing past the very like beginner stage, right? And
yeah,
everybody does that because it feels good. You feel
Okay.
like you're doing something, like you're
yeah,
making changes, but you're really not. Yeah.
Well, so this is also something that comes down to like what is specific and what's actually valuable to you. And this is something that's super important that I'm glad you brought up, because it's figuring out what your particular goal is. Because I can almost guarantee that your goal is not read an HTML book. Like that's really not your goal. Your goal is to
right,
have a job where you can go live wherever you want, you can work from wherever, you can make your own schedule, and you can make an absolute buttload of money. Like that's most likely what your goal is. But
yeah,
one of the steps in getting there is this HTML book. So figuring out the actual steps, or having someone help you figure out the steps that you need in order to get where you're going, is going to be most helpful. But I agree with you, because like sometimes I've been there where just kind of orbiting around and never really doing it. And when I
yeah,
look back, I can kind of pinpoint I didn't exactly know what my actual goals were. And
mhm,
in cybersecurity, I was this way for a while. I just did anything. I got a
yeah,
master's in cybersecurity. I was reading any book out there in like the OSU cyber canon. I was doing like just orbiting around. And then
yeah,
all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I need these day one skills. So like let's go down the practical route and do these practical things. And
mm,
and it makes it gets you to that bullseye. But it took me actually running into someone who's been working in the industry for like 5 or 10 years already to be like, hey, maybe this is what you should do, and they were spot on.
Well,
yeah,
that's the thing though. A lot of times you need people that are, if you find people that are more advanced than you, they can give you that insight into maybe what the best path is or approach or what to focus on and to not like waste your time, but also to find what works for you and it's right. It is hard though. It's very hard. I think that's why people are so willing to pay for education too, because it is like it's having somebody else kind of help you guide you, right? And like figure
yeah.
that stuff out, which makes it easier.
I think because I think that's probably like one of the biggest things, right? I'm thinking back about what you were saying, Randall, about how you're sort of like orbiting around this idea of like basically in your head, you're just saying, I want to be a hacker, right? And so that doesn't really get you anywhere because it's not an achievable goal or measurable goal. I'm going back to SMAR.
Mhm.
But but so like, and I see Rachel just posted something here about curious to
Yeah.
find a path in cybersecurity, right? So here's the thing, right? So when you when you actually want to break away from that idea of like, I just want to become a hacker, how do you do that, right? So like I wanted to become a web developer and my goal was to become, to work for a company that I was passionate about, right? So how would you say somebody can go ahead and do that that's in the group and was watching right now? What would you say is like their first thing? Because I'm going to tell you mine. My thought is you need to like one see what somebody in that like career path did to get there, right? I talk about this a lot is like if you have like a coach or a mentor or something, like you're trusting this person because they've achieved what you're trying to do already, right? And so they can give you sort of the path to get there. And so that's like my first thing is you have to find somebody who knows what the path is that you're trying to take or where you're trying to go and then those steps to get there. Like, you want to be a web developer, you can't learn React before you learn HTML. It's a stepwise thing.
Can I jump in there? That's a
Yeah,
no, the
yeah.
stepwise thing is really good. And I think also like one of the things too is the specificity of our goal is really important. Like I know I found out myself, like we're like, I was like, I want to get into web development or something or programming. It's like, well, that's super vague and huge. That's a
Yeah.
big, umbrella category. So then like, okay, I realized a little bit into that, like, okay, so this is a good, it got me started and I love technology, but now I know a little bit more. How can I narrow this down? And continually narrowing that goal down to something more actionable over time is a good method. Because at first you might not know, and you don't know if you're learning something new, right? What you're going to like, what aspects of it, and like we know, like there's so many languages, so many frameworks, so
Oh
many
my God.
different
Yeah.
things you can focus on and do and specialize in that, like you just don't know about them until you get into it, or you meet somebody like you said that's more advanced and can help you understand like, okay, if you want to do this, this is the best path or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead,
And
Randall. And you can
I
answer Rachel's
also
question too.
okay, so Rachel, to answer your question, probably the best way to get started is just start on Try Hack Me because there's so many different routes that you can go, and Try Hack Me has very actionable stuff that you can do, and it'll help you even if you want the T and the smart, it'll help you be timely because you can say I want to do this much every day. But yeah, that's probably one of the best ways. Tryhackme.com, and because cybersecurity is freaking huge. Like what I was just actually going to point out was like the orbiting around cybersecurity and even around
Mm.
coding for a long time is actually very helpful in that it built a foundation for cybersecurity. So like
Yeah.
while I was orbiting, I learned a whole bunch of programming languages. I learned how to program. I learned how to read programs, how to debug programs. I took computer certifications like A plus, Network plus, Security plus. I learned all about networking. I learned all about security, all about computers, how they work inside and out. And all this stuff is an excellent foundation for cybersecurity because it all
Mm.
builds on top of that. Like cybersecurity is essentially just knowing computers better than anybody else. And so while it's helpful to have all that stuff, and I'm sure Russ, like you can kind of pick out the point when you stopped orbiting and all of a sudden you knew like this was like I remember
Yeah.
that when that was for you, like when you decided React was a thing and like all of a
Yeah.
sudden you just went like a
Yeah.
laser beam. And
Yeah.
once you but it took a while of orbiting around and we had to do all this stuff with like Docker and with like
Yeah.
Yeah.
all these other
Yeah.
things,
You just love Docker.
every cloud thing out there. And so yeah, it's just
But that's the other thing though, is there's so much stuff out there that orbiting can be a valuable also experience. And like no, I think that's the other problem is we tend to hate ourselves for thinking we're not making progress when in fact we're making progress by narrowing down what we actually want to do. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I remember that point when he focused on React, it was like a laser beam. And then like, I remember for all of us, like when we found our spot that was really good for us and that worked. And it did take, it takes learning what's out there. Because dude, the landscape changed. I mean, I remember when I first started this, there was like HTML, that was it. You
Yeah.
know, it was a way different style of programming, and it was, I think a lot a lot more difficult to make nice looking stuff and to do things. So like now it's gotten easier but harder too because there's so much stuff out there now.
Yeah. You made me really think about that because it is true. And there was definitely a point where I was like, okay, like React is the shit and I'm going to just start learning React. And I went like crazy on React. And what's interesting that I'm thinking about is all this orbiting, call it, that I was doing before actually taught me so much about full stack development because
Oh yeah.
I had learned all these things that were like low code. Like I learned Shopify and WordPress and all these other different frameworks for building low code websites where you have to know a little bit of code, like a little bit of PHP or a little bit of CSS or whatever, but most of it's handled for you. But what that actually taught me a lot of was, yes, it taught me like a little bit of CSS and whatever, but I think it taught me something even more powerful, which is the bigger picture of web development, right? Like I learned how these different pieces of the web interact with each other. Like, you have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which is just running in your browser, but then you have databases and APIs. And it's really important when you're a full stack developer to understand how all these pieces connect to each other to make the app that we think is just magic, right? It just, you press a button and it does the thing. But there's so many different
The
things
edit button.
happening in the back. Yeah, like I know it's an inside joke, but like somebody one time asked me to develop something and they were like, yeah, you just throw one of those like edit buttons on there and it just like you can just edit everything. And I was like, that's not at all how it works, but
Wish it was that way, buddy, but
yeah,
like
like there's no such thing as a button. Like you make that, it's like, I mean, yeah, there's the HTML button, but you have to style it and all that, whatever. So, but that did teach me a lot of those things. So I guess that is a good point. Like if you feel like you're in a position of sort of orbiting right now, you're still doing something powerful towards like getting towards your goal. But before I let you go, Danny, I will say this is I think it's very important that as quick as you can, you find that goal, right? Because you're gonna just keep orbiting until you have a direction, right? Like until you have a space where you're ready to like put a lot of dedicated energy, you're just gonna, like Danny said before, is do these comfortable things. And it's really important as a software developer to do the uncomfortable things. And a lot of times they end up being easier than you think. But anyway, what were you gonna say, Daniel? Daniel.
no, I was gonna say like no, I agree with you. And I think we can be hard on ourselves when we're orbiting, but it's a good learning phase. And
Mhm.
like it's not a bad thing, but like you said too, finding that the faster you find that path, the better. But like if you're getting into this because you love, technology, reminding yourself of that too,
If you're
because that
getting into
helps,
this,
Yeah, sorry.
That's all
Um,
right.
yeah, Chris said he's orbiting.
Yeah,
And
I saw that.
way to go, Chris.
it's
Good
good,
job.
man. It's
Yeah, it
good.
is good.
Chris,
Yo, can I
what?
say I want to add something?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
so like one of the things that's really helped me out a lot with accountability is two things side by side. So like one, trying to do a little bit every day, and it's just the smallest bit that I can possibly do so I can check that off. And usually that's been either a little bit to my GitHub contribution graph or a little bit on something like Try Hack Me, where they also have a contribution graph. So it's just like saying that I've done a teeny little bit every single day. So that's really helpful. And the second thing is reminding myself that I have so much freaking time. So like
Mm.
for me, what stopped me a lot was this time pressure, thinking that I had to know it immediately. But what was helpful was actually going and doing one of those like real quizzes from the insurance companies, like how long you're likely going to live, and
Mhm.
seeing like, oh my goodness, I still have that much longer to go. Like I better find something that I enjoy doing because I have a lot of time. And so
Yeah.
like just reminding myself that I don't have to do it that fast. If I learn this stuff in 10 years, I still have a heck of a lot of time to do it. And so like those two things paired together, just every day making a teeny little bit of progress that your SMART goals, you can measure it because it has a little contribution graph. And then
I feel like I
just
heard a
reminding
T
yourself.
there. I feel like I might have heard a little T at the end.
Sorry. And then also just reminding yourself you have a lot longer than you may think.
Yeah. Um,
Eric
Eric
just
has
asked,
said,
yeah. Oh,
He says, should I work on some projects that's tangible? Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things in getting hired is actually building your own project.
and also just having projects too is like it's good because it forces you to actually finish stuff and also run
Yeah,
into problems that you won't encounter when you're just trying to learn like from a book or something. So yeah, that's a
yeah,
really good method. Is projects like practically oriented projects are awesome and
yeah.
very
That's a really
helpful.
good point too. And I want to add to that is part of like my orbiting time was doing Code Academy, right? And Code Academy actually taught me a lot. I really like their platform, but it was a lot of orbiting. And the reason why is that they have a built-in IDE, right? So they have a built-in development environment. So as you're doing it, like you're just working within their website the whole time. And it doesn't give you that practical experience of like, I kept doing all these different like learning paths on Code Academy. But then when I would go to actually like build something, I was like, I don't even know where to start because I'm just so used to doing it in their browser that
Other
like,
sandbox?
yeah, like in
Yeah.
their sandbox that it didn't make sense to me when I went out into like do it on my own in like VS Code or something, right? So yeah, that was like huge for me. It was doing projects on my own and don't do some like when you're in the beginning, yes, it's important to do like super tiny, small projects that are tic tac toe or whatever, just so you get the concept of the basics. But what I'm talking about with a project is like a larger thing, you know, a web app or something like that, where you can connect all these pieces because you will learn, you will hate your life for a little bit, but you'll learn so much because you're going to figure out okay, when they teach you a tutorial, when you're watching something on YouTube or on anything like Code, it's curated. It's designed to be super easy for you. But
It's designed to make you feel good too. And like a
yeah,
lot of them, they're just the examples from the documentation. Like on the
exactly.
project thing, like I think picking a project that's outside of your actual abilities is really important too when you're learning. Pick something that's going to force you to try new things, like set up a back end, or force you
Exactly.
to do something that you don't know how to do, like get into more advanced styling. But that'll help you really learn like what to do when you're facing problems and how to solve them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even the other day, this came up to me in my head because I was working with an API, and it's like when you learn APIs, when people teach you APIs, they're like, yeah, it's just you know basic operations like CRUD operations, right?
Yeah.
But then when you actually go to use an API, what people don't realize is every single API is made differently. Every
Yeah.
single one out there is different. There's no like set standard necessarily for APIs. You just have to read the documentation and understand what's going on. So that's a huge thing is building your own project so that you can get experience with things like that where when you use the Stripe API, it's going to be different than when you use ChatGPT's API, right? They're very different things. And you have to fit like that's 90% of being a developer is going
Yeah.
through those challenges and pushing yourself like past that. So anyway, I don't know if you guys have closing thoughts, but I had one last thing that I wanted to offer as advice
All
for
right.
accountability. Do you guys have any last closing thoughts
No.
before I? All right. You okay there, Randall?
I'm
No,
good.
are you just thinking hard?
Real hard about
It looked
teas.
like a pooping face, but I guess I was just thinking. Anyway, all right. So here's the number one thing that you guys didn't think of that for us, for the three of us that kept us accountable. Can you think of it now that I brought it up like that?
Working
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
dude, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our coding group, right? The number one thing that I can attribute to us being accountable is that when we started this boot camp, we met every single Saturday at this time, the three of us
We've been doing that for years
share,
too.
and we've
Yeah.
been doing it for years, and it's to share our progress, right? So we talked about that just a few minutes ago about how we're not necessarily on a timeline here, but we are keeping each other accountable because every week we show up and we share what have we done this week, what were our challenges this week, what have we learned, and we share with each other. And it's I can attribute that
Yeah.
100% to being the number one thing that's kept me the most accountable, has helped me achieve my goals, and really has helped me become a software developer because it really helps to not be just like a solo orbiting person out there by yourself, right? You need some grounding, and we're
Not
here
only,
to.
oh, sorry, and not only that too, but we each ended up focusing on different things. So I also learned a lot about other stuff just from those weekly meetings that I might not have otherwise even encountered, you know?
Absolutely. And I bring this up for a good point, for a good
Yeah.
reason. And that is that this week we will start our group mentoring. So, not this like week, but next week. And we will start our group mentoring. So, if you
Wonderful.
guys are interested in being part of this group with us, instead of just watching, if you want to interact with us, like get on a call with us and talk, we will be offering group mentoring starting next Saturday will be the first one. So every week we'll be offering group mentoring directly after this call. So we'll hang up this call, all the, everybody in the group will hang up. And then if you're part of that group mentoring, you'll get on a separate call with us and you can be part of our community a little bit closer to us and share what you're doing, get advice from us, ask us direct questions, let us review your code, help you with code, help you understand anything that you're going through at the time, and really keep you accountable to your own goals and where you're trying to get to. So I hope that sounds interesting to you guys, and you guys decide to join us. Keep an eye on the group because we're just finalizing the website, our website, in the next day. And then on Monday, I think Monday or Tuesday, we'll be opening up the offer for group mentoring. So, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And thank you, Randy and Danny, for being here. Happy Saturday morning to everybody else. Good to see everybody here. Eric, Chris, Rachel, the regulars. We'll call them the regulars.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys next week. Peace
Later.
out.